أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومنهم من يلمزك في الصدقات فإن أعطوا منها رضوا وإن لم يعطوا منها إذا هم يسخطون ولو أنهم رضوا ما آتاهم الله ورسوله وقالوا حسبنا الله سيؤتينا الله من فضله ورسوله إنا إلى الله راغبون إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم صدق الله العظيم.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد الصادق الأمين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله الطاهرين الطيبين وعلى أصحابه أجمعين. وبالإسناد المتصل إلى الإمام القاضي أبي الخير عبد الله ابن عمر al-Baydawi رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا به آمين قال في تفسيره أنوار التنزيل وأسرار التأويل قوله تعالى ومنهم من يلمزك قال يعيبك وقرأ يعقوب يلمزك بالضم. Qadi Baydawi said in his tafsir of the verse in Surat al-Tawba 58, and of them is he that casts aspersions on you, yalmizuka. This is how I translated yalmizuka, and he explained it, shames you, ya'ibuka. Then he said Yaqub read it yalmuzuka with dam, meaning dam of the meme in yalmizuka. Instead of yalmizuka, he read it yalmuzuka, as did others, most important among them al-Hasan al-Basri, and second to him Ibn Muhaysin. Why? Because these are the only two of the list, apart from, of course, the irregular readings of Ibn Kathir and Asim and Abu Amr reported here. The only two of the 10 readings, of the 14 readings. So they are part of the last 4 of the 14 readings, which are not mass transmitted. The last 4 are not mass transmitted. And they are the readings of Al-Hasan ibn Muhaysin, Al-A'mash, and Al-Yazidi. So whenever any one of those 4 come up, they should be the first ones to be mentioned after the 10 mass transmitted readings. So when we are done with the top 7, and then Yaqub, and then we end with Abu Ja'far and Khalaf, so that's 10. Then we start with any one of those 4, Al-Hasan, Ibn Muhaysin, Al-Yazidi, and Al-A'mash. قال وابن كثير يلامزك. I put it in the footnote that Ibn Kathir also read it yulamizuka, it turns out that this is not a mass transmitted reading of Ibn Kathir, so this is misleading. And this is why I treated it as an interpolation. I put in the footnote, this is probably an interpolation. So I put interpolation question mark, meaning an addition, because number one, it doesn't appear in all the manuscripts. It appears in just a couple of the manuscripts that I had under my hand. And number two, it is a mistake. It's a blunder. Ibn Kathir's unqualified, i.e. mass transmitted reading is identical with that of the majority. Yulamizuka is therefore an irregular reading related from Hammad ibn Salama from Ibn Kathir. So Hammad ibn Salama is not one of the mass transmitted rawis, yani narrators from Ibn Kathir. Although Hammad ibn Salama in his own right is a well-respected hadith master. Hammad ibn Zayd, Hammad ibn Salama, they are both trustworthy. But in the Quranic readings, it is a different matter. And also Ibn Samayfa, that's also a Shaz reading. The original text behind al-Baydawi's text by Jarullah Zamakhshari, this is what I refer to as J. That's Zamakhshari, because his laqab is Jarullah. Since he lived in Mecca, next to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore the neighbor of Allah, Jarullah. So he mentions the variants here without attribution, without saying this is by so and so, this is by so and so. He says Quri'a, and it was also read. So these, to say that Ibn Kathir read it like that, that is misleading. That's why I treat it as an interpolation. ثم قال في الصدقات أي في قسمتها, over the alms, meaning in their division. And then the next verse, the continuation of the verse, فَإِنْ أُعْطُوا مِنْهَا رَضُوا وَإِنْ لَمْ يُعْطَوْا مِنْهَا إِذَا هُمْ يَسْخَطُونَ. Thus, this stands for the fa. If they are given something out of them, out of the alms, they are pleased. And if they are not given something out of them, behold, they are incensed. So, yaskhatun, I have to translate it with something stronger than angered, because that would be for ghadab. Ghadiba yaghdab. Hence the incensed. So, it was said, قيل إنها نزلت في أبي الجواظ المنافق قال ألا ترون إلى صاحبكم إنما يقسم صدقاتكم في رعاة الغنم ويزعم أنه يعدل. It was said, it was revealed first in reference to Abu al-Jawaz, the hypocrite, who said, do you not see that your friend is only dividing your alms among the shepherds, and yet he claims that he is just? Thus in Zamakhshari. And related from Al-Kalbi by Al-Thalabi. So Al-Kalbi is a very famously extremely weak narrator, therefore immediately you know that this is a very weak narration. Al-Kalbi's narration from Ibn Abbas, that is the famous Tafsir Ibn Abbas, is based on that, the one that is in the souks being sold as Tafsir Ibn Abbas, which was gathered centuries later by Imam Fayruzabadi, the author of the Qamus, but is based entirely on the riwayah of Al-Kalbi from Ibn Abbas. So it is a very weak chain of transmission, therefore it is not a well considered tafsir. The true authentic tafsir from Ibn Abbas is Ibn Abi Talha from Ibn Abbas, which Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal praised. but this is not part of it. Okay. Also al-Wahidi, the student of Imam al-Thalabi, and al-Baghawi, but only as Abu al-Jawad saying, you have not divided justly. Now that part is authenticated and supported by what follows. Namely, Waqil ibn al-Khuwaysirah, this is the second gloss. In other words, it goes with, it was said, it was revealed, number one in reference to the first one, and then number two, it was also said. So he treats it as weaker, because he's only following Az-Zamakhshari's order here, but since the next report is from Bukhari and Muslim, and he wrote a commentary on the Masabih of al-Baghawi, but it would have required, analysis of the hadiths here and knowledge of them, and then he would have reversed the order, because he sometimes reverses the order that Zamakhshari puts his glosses in and chooses a different priority for them based on what he considers the stronger gloss, which would have been perfect here to do also. So he says, في ابن الخويصرة رأس الخوارج كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقسم غنائم حنين فاستعطف قلوب أهل مكة بتوفير الغنائم عليهم فقال اعدل يا رسول الله فقال ويلك إن لم أعدل فمن يعدل. So two, in reference to Ibn Dhil Khuwaysira, the head of the Khawarij, the seceders, and I have a section on them in the glossary of persons and sects. The Messenger of Allah was dividing the spoils of Hunayn and sought to soften the hearts of the people of Mecca by lavishing the spoils on them in abundance. So this was part of his ta'lif of their hearts, their attracting their hearts. So you'd give them in abundance, meaning 100 camels a person, like that. 100 camels a person. Imagine giving 100 cars. Like even the sultans of this world, they never did that to anyone. But so this was in order to capture the powerful, the wealthy, the influential ones of Mecca, and also they were related to him more than the others. So there was different reasons perhaps that went into play here, but it was not understood by this man, and it turns out to be a progenitor of the Khawarij of later times. So the Kharijite said, "Be just, Messenger of Allah." Whereupon he replied, "Woe to you! If I am not just, then who is just?" This is in Bukhari and Muslim, as well as Imam Ahmad's Musnad. مقال وإذا للمفاجأة نائب مناب الفاء الجزائية. إذا, behold, denotes suddenness and stands for the fa of apodosis, yani the jawab of the conditional sentence, that if this, then that. So this then is almost obligatory to use in the Arabic as the fa of jawab al-shart, yani the answer or the correlative or the apodosis, that's the technical term here that I use, for the conditional sentence that was set up, the condition. If this, then that. So if, then. And here, إذا stands for the fa. So إذا is as if the reply and the correlative of the conditional sentence. And إذا means behold, all of a sudden. So it's like, if you give them, they are happy. But if they are not given something of the monies of zakat, yani the sadaqat here, behold, all of a sudden, they become very angry. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, like that. قوله تعالى ولو أنهم رضوا ما آتاهم الله ورسوله قال ما أعطاهم الرسول من الغنيمة أو الصدقة وذكر الله تعالى للتعظيم والتنبيه على أن ما فعله الرسول كان بأمره تعالى. He said, Allah saying, and if only they were satisfied with what the one God and His Messenger brought them or gave them. Meaning, al-Baydawi says, with what the Messenger gave them of spoils or of alms. So the spoils are the booty that is gathered from war or after a battle or after a victory. So that's the spoils of war, or of alms, meaning the monies that is remitted by the wealthy as the obligatory alms. Here we are talking about, when we say the sadaqat and the sadaqat, we're talking only about the obligatory alms. So from the context we know, and this happens a lot in the Qur'an, in hadith, in the Sirah, where we're talking about, so who should we give the sadaqah next year, Ya Rasulullah, if we do not find you? Yani they were asking bluntly. So he said, give them to Abu Bakr. And if we do not find Abu Bakr, yani if he died also, then Umar. Like that. So the term that they were using was sadaqat. Then Imam Baydawi says something very important because it applies very frequently. The mention of Allah here is for magnification. Allah and His Messenger. So the thing is that people are directed to act upon what concerns the Messenger because they do not see Allah. They do not deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly so that they would have an excuse that to say that, well, we do not see Allah. How do we? Well, the Messenger. So the mention of Allah is to say that this is from His command. But you have to deal with you have to treat Him with high respect. You have to act upon that. And the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for magnification and for notification that what the Messenger did was by His command. قوله تعالى وقالوا حسبنا الله سيؤتينا الله من فضله ورسوله إنا إلى الله راغبون. حسبنا الله كفانا فضله. It means the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they said the one God is enough for us. It means His bounty suffices for us. Whatever He gives us. Allah is enough for us, meaning what He gives us is enough for us. And then the one God shall bring us of His bounty, meaning other alms or spoils. And if today is I did not get anything, or I got something little in comparison to this one or that one, then another day other alms or spoils, other sadaqat or spoils from war. As shall His Messenger, so that He will give us more than what He gave us this time. Yeah. Then verily we are humbly beseeching the one God. So verily translates inna, which is emphatic, hence the verily. This is what I do throughout. And ila Allahi raghibun, we are humbly beseeching the one God. قال كفانا فضله سيؤتينا الله من فضله صدقة أو غنيمة أخرى ورسوله فيؤتينا أكثر مما آتانا إنا إلى الله راغبون أي في أن يغنينا من فضله. We are humbly beseeching one God that He will enrich us out of His bounty. ثم قال والآية بأسرها في حيز الشرط والجواب محذوف تقديره لكان خيرا لهم. So he comments, the verse in its entirety is in the province of the conditional. So it is all subsumed under conditionality. And the apodosis is suppressed. In other words, the jawab al-shart of the whole, this, because the whole clause, the whole verse is saying, if they had said this, but the apodosis is not mentioned. If they had only said when they got alms, or if they were satisfied and they said this, Allah is enough for us, the Messenger is enough for us, and He will give us later more, and so forth, and then nothing. Where is the then what? Where is the jawab, the answer of the shart? So he explains that. He doesn't just let it pass like that, because whatever question a reader of Arabic would ask themselves, the mufassir has to bring it up. Can't just ignore it because just because it's not in the text of the Qur'an that he is commenting. I mean, then it's not mentioned, it doesn't mention. No. So he brings it up, and we have to understand it. He says its apodosis is suppressed and subordered. Yani, you imagine it as meaning that. You must bring it up in your mind. It is subordered, meaning it is. It's like saying it is implied as that. So the subordination of a statement is the supplying of that statement by yourself according to the rules of logic and grammar and the context of the drift, the siyaq, or you can say the thrust of the statement. What is the thrust of the statement? What is the drift of the statement? It's meaning the general sense that the statement is driving at. Subordinate as what? Quote, as it would certainly have been better for them. تقديره لكان خيرا لهم. Okay. قال ثم بين مصارف الصدقات تصويبا وتحقيقا لما فعله الرسول عليه السلام. فقال, so he said, then he defined, Allah defined. You see, this is, as we mentioned, very frequent in the Muslim Mufassirin's style, that it is Allah speaking. Then He says this, then He says that. Then He defined the due recipients of the alms as a validation and ratification of what the Messenger had done. And He said, then He moves on to the next verse. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين. The alms are only إنما, أداة حصر. So, for none but. For the poor, those in need. Second category is those in need. So the poor is the first category. Al-Fuqara. Wal-Masakin. Those in need. So it would be stronger to just say and, even if it goes against the rules of English style. I tend to, to forget that, but going back and reading again, I realize that it is stronger. The wow is more literal and also stronger. Just it adds more strength, because in Arabic it is extremely strong. So the important notice here is that the poor and those in need are two different categories. They are numbered categories. They are not standing one for the other. They are not interchangeable or superfluous or synonymous. Each one covers what the other does not. So this is a very strong proof for a differentiation of the senses of fuqara and masakin. So he defines that to make it clear. He says, i.e., this is how I translate when he says a. And if he says ma'nahu or يعني, I would say meaning. So i.e., which is Latin for id est, that is, quote, the monies of zakat are for these ones being enumerated and for no one else. أي الزكوات, so I translated that as the monies of zakat. لهؤلاء المعدودين دون غيرهم, they are for these ones being enumerated and for no one else. So this reflects the أداة الحصر إنما. قال وهو دليل على أن المراد باللمز لمزهم في قسم الزكوات دون الغنائم. And it is evidence that what is meant by the aspersions mentioned in the previous verse, so some of them they cast aspersions on you. ومنهم من يلمزك, the lams. So the one, the lammaz is the one that casts a lot of aspersions, that habitually casts aspersion. There is a book called al-Lammaz ala al-Ghammaz, or vice versa, al-Ghammaz ala al-Lammaz. It's about weak hadiths, I think by Samhudi, if I'm not mistaken. So this lams, he says this verse is the beginning of the verse is evidence that what is meant by the aspersions is aspersions against them in the division of the zakat monies rather than the spoils. مقال والفقير, definition of the faqir, من لا مال له ولا كسب يقع موقعا من حاجته من الفقار كأنه أصيب فقاره. The faqir, pauper, is the one that has neither property nor income that might in any way meet his needs. So emphasis on in any way, and it does not in any way meet his needs. From faqar, vertebra, as if it affected his spine. So the faqir is the one who is so poor that it affects the way that he stands, because he can hardly eat enough to keep his spine up. So hunger folds him in two. قال والمسكين من له مال أو كسب لا يكفيه من السكون كأن العجز أسكنه. The miskin, which I translate as one word as disadvantaged. So I have two translations for miskin, the one in need and then the disadvantaged. Is one that has some property or income, but they do not suffice him. From sukun, stillness, as if helplessness had made him still. So كأن العجز أسكنه. So he's عاجز means incapable, incapacitated, helpless. He has this to pay, he has that to pay, he cannot, does not know what to do. He can only pay some of it. See the difference there. So the more intense one is the faqir, the less intense one is the miskin. As indicated by قال يدل عليه قوله تعالى أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين من سورة الكهف وأنه عليه السلام سألوا المسكنة وتعوذ من الفقر. So this distinction between the two terms, semantically and in the issue of register and the intensity of each in relation to the other, is indicated by first the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may He be exalted, as for the boat it belonged to masakin, disadvantaged ones. So in other words, they had property. And two, the fact that he, upon him peace, used to pray for maskana. And here I give yet another translation for maskana, dependency. So in say dependent, disadvantaged, in need. No. Miskin, someone that is not visibly poor, is not obviously poor, and might not even ask anyone. But if a chance comes, then they will grab it. They will be happy for it because it plugs a hole in their need. So these people owned a boat. That's a proof. And then the Prophet ﷺ prayed for the fact that he, upon him peace, used to pray for maskana, dependency. Hadith in Sunan al-Tirmidhi and Ahmad, let's see, Anas by al-Tirmidhi, and then Abu Sa'id al-Khudri in Ibn Majah and al-Hakim, and Ubadah ibn al-Samit in al-Bayhaqi Sunan, and Abu Huraira in Muslim. But to that sense, that it's not exactly part of the list. Otherwise, it would be put first. It would be mentioned first. But I mean, literally speaking, Allahumma ahyini miskinan wa tawaffani miskinan, or amitni wa amitni, or wa tawaffani kama qal sallallahu alaihi wasallam, miskinan. Oh Allah, grant me life as a miskin, and grant me death as a miskin. واحشرني في زمرة المساكين يوم القيامة, and regather me in the throng or the assembly of the masakin on the day of resurrection. So this is what is narrated by the first of the list here that I listed, and then something to that effect in Sahih Muslim from Abu Huraira, meaning Allahumma ij'al quta ali Muhammad, or Allahumma ij'al rizqa ali Muhammad qutan. Oh Allah, make the rizq of the house of Muhammad enough, just enough for us. Qutan. This is a very powerful hadith. Subhanallah, that if you love Ahlul Bayt, if you want to be like Ahlul Bayt, this is an ideal for the Muslim. To be asking, Ya Rabbi, just enough for us. Do not ask from this dunya except the sufficiency. Subhanallah. As for the rest, there is no need for it. And this is what he was making dua for his family. The dua of Prophet ﷺ for his family. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. I mentioned that in the Musnad of Ahlul Bayt. So the other proof from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is that he would seek refuge from faqr. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الفقر ومن فتنة الغنى ومن فتنة الفقر, and اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الفقر. And he would say كاد الفقر أن يكون كفرا. And poverty can drive certain people almost to unbelief. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects people from unbelief by protecting them from faqr. But others whom he knows they can bear it, then he tries with faqr. And then, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that to impel us and remind us to seek refuge, as he did also, as a teaching to the Ummah, from that aspect of poverty. So these are strong proofs from language, you see, and from Qur'an and from Hadith. وقيل بالعكس لقوله أو مسكينا ذا متربة. It was also said the reverse is true. The reverse is the case, meaning that the stronger one, the one that is more intense, is miskin and maskana. In light of his statement, may he be exalted, or a miskin, destitute one, cleaving to dust, or to the dust, in Surat al-Balad. So he has nothing, and he cleaves to the dust because hunger casts him down into the dust. So he can hardly get up from the dust. Subhanallah, from this destitution. So I have to translate miskin in a fourth way, which is destitution, destitute one. That is the fair thing in the context of the ayah where it is mentioned. So the reverse is the case, meaning the first definition applies to the miskin and the second to the faqir, in light of this statement. But he weakens that by introducing it as in the passive voice. It was said, it is said, it was said. So that is his way of weakening it, and also through the positioning in second position, and reserving the first position to what he considers the stronger gloss, or the strong gloss. قال والعاملين عليها الساعين في تحصيلها وجمعها. The workers gathering it, they're door-to-door canvassers and collectors. Canvasser, يعني the door-to-door worker. You say that, canvasser. You can apply it. Does not have to be only in its most latest, most contemporary applications, which is, to gather votes. Which is how we habitually hear it nowadays. Then he said, قال والمؤلفة قلوبهم قوم أسلموا ونيتهم ضعيفة فيه، يعني في الإسلام أو في كونهم أسلموا، فيستألف قلوبهم. Those whose hearts are being reconciled, the first clause is a people that submitted, but their intentions therein are weak. So he wins over their hearts. أو أشراف يترقب بإعطائهم ومراعاتهم إسلام نظرائهم. وقد أعطى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عيينة بن حصن والأقرع بن حابس والعباس بن مرداس لذلك, or members of the elite upon whose gifting and minding hinges the submission of their counterparts. Yani those who have not yet submitted. You see, نظراء here, نظيره, يعني its equivalent, its counterpart. So you see the politics of the Prophet ﷺ. He knows the hearts of people, and it is based on that knowledge of their psychology and from Allah's wahi and revelation that this is going to affect them. He was there watching. So he wants to say to them, as if when we say, we are addressing the daughter-in-law, but we want the neighbor to hear. That is an Arabic saying. That the lady of the house is talking loud to her daughter-in-law, but she wants the neighbor to hear. The Messenger of Allah gave Uyayna ibn Hisn, Al-Aqra ibn Habis, and Al-Abbas ibn Mirdas for that reason. لذلك. وقيل, now the weaker gloss. It was also said, أشراف يستألفون على أن يسلموا. They are the elite whose hearts are reconciled as a precondition of their submitting. In other words, before their Islam. So, mu'allafat al-qulub has two meanings. Number one, those that already entered Islam, but with a transitive hope of impact on those that are watching, that are on the fence. But primarily it means those that already became Muslim, such as those three ones to whom he gave huge amounts of gifts, camels and so forth. And then the weaker gloss is that he's giving to non-Muslims to attract them. فإنه عليه السلام كان يعطيهم من خمس الخمس. The Prophet ﷺ would give them out of the fifth of the spoils. والأصح أنه كان يعطيهم من خمس الخمس الذي كان خاص ماله. But the sounder finding is that he would give them out of the part of the fifth of the spoils that was his personal property, his fifth of the spoils. So part of his humus, not just in absolute term, he would give them from the humus, or from the one part of the humus. So the humus is the spoils of war have 5/5. So any one part of them is called humusul humus. Does not have to be the fifth part of the spoils, because the fifth part is his part. But when we say in Arabic humusul humus, yani one of the parts of the 5 parts of the spoils. So here the Imam is saying that this was from his own personal property already now. His fifth has become his own, and out of that he chooses, does not have to give the non-Muslims. So it could be a gift, for example, to a relative and so forth, so to attract them. قال وقد عد منهم من يؤلف قلبه بشيء منها على قتال الكفار ومانع الزكاة. Also counted among them were those whose hearts were reconciled with part of the latter, yani part of the fifth of the spoils, for fighting the polytheists and the withholders of zakah. وقيل, it was also said, كان سهم المؤلفة لتكثير سواد الإسلام فلما أعزه الله وأكثر أهله سقط. It was also said, so this is yet another weak gloss, that the share of the reconciled aimed at augmenting the Islamic masses. So when Allah made Islam mighty and multiplied its adherents, the share was nullified. So there was no longer the mu'allafat al-qulub share of the zakat after Islam became strong. So this is a weak gloss. قوله تعالى وفي الرقاب, statement of Allah upon slaves. So riqab literally means the necks. So the necks that are in chain, the necks that are under the yoke of ownership by someone else, human necks. So all of these, the fact that they are not just any necks, human necks, and they are under chains of ownership and chattel and so forth, it is just too difficult to put it all if we want to be literal and keep the literal term of the Arabic. Cannot. So just give the meaning here, and this is a concession, and we say slaves, although the term slaves was not literally used, but the synecdoche that was used stands for the whole person. So, and a certain type of person also. So all of this is summed up and referred to as slaves. And upon slaves, so they are recipients of the zakat. قال وللصرف في فك الرقاب بأن يعاون المكاتب بشيء منها على أداء النجوم, meaning to be invested. So the zakat is to be invested in the emancipation of slaves. يعني فك الرقاب, فك رقبة. So fak is to undo that shackle, to break that shackle. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this is what you should use the zakat for. And here it is in the particular context of a slave trying to buy out their own freedom. They all have that option. Work and amass the income required to buy themselves out back to freedom, whereby the slave who is buying himself out be helped to remit the installments, meaning must be helped to remit the installments. See, so the slave working and saving becomes a valid recipient of the zakat of the rich person, whether the owner or someone who knows the case of that slave and is watching, and so on. So all of them, they can use, they can spend their zakat to free that slave. That is accepted. So they give the zakat to that slave, and then the slave becomes free. That is what is called mukataba, meaning the manumission written agreement between the slave and their owner. So the slave who buys themselves out through that way, their name is the mukatab. The mukatab, and anyone that helps them in their mukatabat becomes their mawla. Becomes their mawla or client, and the slave becomes the patron, and the slave becomes the client. But as a freed person now. وقيل, and then it was also said, now this is the weaker gloss, بأن تبتاع الرقاب فتعتق وبه قال مالك وأحمد أو بأن يفدى الأسارى. It was also said slaves are bought and then freed. That is what it means here. The sadaqah is due, the zakat is due upon slaves, يعني for the freeing of slaves, in the sense that they are bought and then freed, which is the position of Malik and Ahmad, or that captives are ransomed, meaning slaves that are slaves because of being captives. The slave, the only valid slavery in Islam is through war captivity, because they are born free. People are born free. There is no such thing as being born a slave unless one is born from slave parent. So but the condition of slavery can only have come from captivity of war. This is why people who would buy slaves, if they were rigorous or they were conscientious believers as Muslims, would verify the origin of the slavery, where they if they were abducted and then sold, then they would know that these are not slaves. If they were captured, that is, captured in war as war captives instead of death, then they would accept. So, if the intent was to buy a beautiful woman, you see, for and it was a pious person buying her, they would immediately marry her. They wouldn't even look into because they would not trust that that was a war captive. Those people would go and abduct and then sell, as slaves. So, and Imam Baydawi mentions that at some point. But here it means that the weak gloss here mentions that it covers بأن يفدى الأسارة, يعني any war captive that you can free, that is also covered by the zakat qualification. Then a point of grammar, والعدول, meaning the shift, عن اللام إلى في, the shift from the lam, which is translated as for, to fi, which is translated as upon. That's why he says وفي الرقاب, and upon slaves. He says صدقة is للفقراء والمساكين, and then وفي الرقاب. So why this shift from the lam to the fi, يعني from for or to upon? He says للدلالة على أن الاستحقاق للجهة لا للرقاب، وقيل للإيذان بأنهم أحق بها. It is to indicate that the due right goes to the purpose, not the persons of the slaves. يعني it is the purpose that is laudable, not because you like or you have an ulterior reason, or see, just the cause itself. So it is not personal, and it is more inclusive, and it is higher and nobler. Shaykh Zada, he has a comment here that is a faqih's comment, and it is perhaps what we should actually focus on more than what I said. He says, i.e. the slaves are not given the amount personally so as to use it freely. I mean, you want to make it happen. You don't want to take risks that the amount will be dilapidated. The way the first four categories are, but rather for them and all the latter four categories, it goes towards extricating them from the state of slavery, debt, and need. So in other words, you become their manager, and you handle the money. You do not give it to them and say, okay, now fend for yourself. Dabbir halak. No, they cannot, they might not be able to in the end, and it might go all to waste. So this is a way to make it happen, their freedom and their emancipation, and as well as the other categories of people who are in debt and so forth. Okay. It was also said to signify that they are more deserving of it. Yani and upon the necks, meaning it is a stronger preposition to use than the lam, and for the necks, upon the necks. قوله تعالى والغارمين, the insolvent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a term, al-gharimin, the insolvent, which Imam Baydawi explains as al-madyunina لأنفسهم في غير معصية, those who are personally indebted for no sinful reason. You see all of these qualifications and qualifiers? Those who are personally indebted for no sinful reason. These are the gharimi. In other words, if it is a gambler who comes and says, brother, how at the casino, then he's not a recipient, because that is a sinful reason. إذا لم يكن لهم وفاء means when they have no way of repaying. Because we say وفى الدين. وفى الدين يعني repay the debt in full. توفاه to take him back in full, take it back in full. Hence إني متوفيك ورافعك إلي. I'm taking you back in full. O Isa, taking you back in full. That is the literal translation. See, I do not like I am causing you to die, because it is not the doctrine of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah concerning Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. So, although it applies in other cases, but here it does not apply in this verse of Surat Al-Imran. So we go back to the literal meaning, and there is a way out of that quandary of language that the English does not help us here, except if you keep literal, which is take back in full. And as for the clarity of it to the English reader, then you have to explain it. You have to remind them of the meaning of wafa, maybe in a footnote or from the context. So لم يكن له وفاء, يعني they have no way of repay. قال أو لإصلاح ذات بين وإن كانوا أغنياء, or to mend relations even if they are rich. لقوله عليه السلام لا تحل الصدقة لغني إلا لخمسة. In light of his statement upon him blessings and peace, alms are not licit for the rich except for 5 reasons, meaning any one of 5 reasons. لغاز في سبيل الله, for a ghazi, a raider in the way of Allah. أو لغارم, or for the insolvent. أو رجل اشتراها بماله, or someone to purchase it with his own wealth, i.e. for the giver of the alms to buy it back from the one he gave it to for its full price. أو رجل له جار مسكين فتصدق على المسكين فأهدى المسكين للغني. Okay. Or for someone who has a disadvantaged neighbor to whom he gives alms, whereupon the disadvantaged one gifts the rich one. So it is no longer alms but a gift. Or the hadith of also, oh Ya Rasulullah, we are eating from that, wasn't it the sadaqah that was given to Ayman? So he replied, well, it was sadaqah for her, but it's the gift from her to us, yani the sharing of the food. See? So and this is important in order to avoid haraj or difficulty inside one and the same household, because she was his freedwoman, she was his mawlat, Ayman, the wife of Allahumma salli wa sallam Muhammad, Zayd ibn Harith, and mother of Usama ibn Zayd. Her name was Barakah. طيب. أو لعامل عليها, or for the one collecting it. Then the next category, قوله تعالى وفي سبيل الله. قال الإمام وللصرف في الجهاد بالإنفاق على المتطوعة وابتياع الكراع والسلاح in the way of the one God في سبيل الله. So the gloss of that is to be invested in jihad by spending one on volunteers and purchasing kura, great horses. So kura, they are great horses, they are war horses. So, and not just any horse. Just like the camel, the travel camel is not just any camel. And weapons. This is the explanation of wafi sabilillah. It has to be helping people who do that activity. It was also said, now the weaker gloss, and on the building of bridges. فقيل وفي بناء القناطر والمصانع. The building of bridges over waterways and watering points. This is a weak gloss. Building of bridges over waterways and watering points. As for the completely unacceptable gloss, it would be to build mosques and madrasas or hospitals or something like that. And yet it was done in the name of this part of the verse in the 20th century by a very famous segment of the community of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, especially in Europe. They built mosques, centers, Islamic centers, and that really helped them establish themselves, spread and so forth. And was based on what? Based on a gloss by al-Qaffal. Al-Qaffal was a Mu'tazili Imam from the Shafi'i Mazhab, but he was a Mu'tazili. And he had a tafsir, and he gave this gloss that it can be, all charity works can be subsumed under fi sabilillah, like that, including educational institutions. And so they use that to extend it to mosques as well. ثم قال وابن السبيل, and on travelers. المسافر المنقطع عن ماله, travelers that have no access to their property or to their wealth. So someone who is traveling with their ATM card or credit card, that doesn't count. See, so because they have access to their wealth. But if not, even if they are wealthy at home, then they qualify if they do not have access to their wealth. قال الله تعالى فريضة من الله, as a fixed share from the one God. Okay. قال مصدر لما دل عليه الآية, أي فرض لهم الصدقات فريضة أو حال من الضمير المستكن في للفقراء. An infinitive noun for what the noble verse indicates, the farida, i.e. he has allotted for them the alms as a farida, يعني فرض فريضة, hence the infinitive noun of farida. And farida translated hence because of this as fixed allotment or a fixed share. Yeah, so when we're talking about the fara'id, for example, it can mean either the categorical duties, categorical obligations, fara'id, like salat, but it can also mean the fixed share in the inheritance law, fara'id. So fara'idi, the one who is a specialist of inheritance law. And we can say also faradi. So fulan al-faradi. So this is what it means here. or a participial state for the covert pronoun in the poor. So the covert pronoun, when you say للفقراء, for the poor, يعني them. So the pronoun would be them, they or them. And the participial state qualifies them. The participial states of what? Of the clause as a fixed share. Like when we say, for example, in thanksgiving, that's a participial state. For that reason, or as such, as such. So here, as a fixed share, is a participial state applying to the third person pronoun in للفقراء. قال وقرئ بالرفع على تلك فريضة يعني على معنى تلك فريضة. It was also read in the nominative. This is a Shaz reading by Ibn Abi Abla. فريضة in the sense of that is a fixed share. يعني the enunciative of a suppressed inchoative, the khabar of a suppressed mubtada. Then Wallahu alimun hakim. That is the end of the verse. And the one God is all-knowing, all-wise. قال يضع الأشياء في مواضعها. He places things in their rightful place or places. وظاهر الآية يقتضي تخصيص استحقاق الزكاة بالأصناف الثمانية. The manifest locution of the verse dictates that the rightful entitlement of zakat is specific to the 8 categories. No more, no less. ووجوب الصرف إلى كل صنف وجد منهم. That it is obligatory for it to be invested into each one of them that is to be found. يعني any one of them or more that is to be found. ومراعاة التسوية بينهم قضية للاشتراك. And that the strict observance of equality between them is dictated by their common partnership. I mean, they are all common partners in being qualified recipients of zakat. So the totality of the zakat must be distributed strictly equally between them. Because they are all equal partners. Not one of them is more deserving than the other. Yani deserving of more zakat. They are all deserving of it, therefore it has to be shared equally. وإليه ذهب الشافعي. So this is the position taken by al-Shafi'i. I mean, all of these qualifiers of our understanding of the fiqh of that verse. وعن عمر. So this wow here, instead of just saying and it is related from Umar, I'll say however it is, because this is how it's meant. So sometimes I will when he says this is the position of so and so, and then wa قال Abu Hanifa, let's say however Abu Hanifa said. And he frequently does that because his area had those two mazhabs. So Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in the strongest position, Shafi'i, Hanafi. And then other than that, it would be maybe the Shia influence on the Ilkhanat of Azerbaijan there at the time. وعن عمر وحذيفة وابن عباس وغيرهم من الصحابة رضي الله عنهم والتابعين جواز صرفها إلى صنف واحد. So, however, it is related from Umar, Hudhayfa, Ibn Abbas and others of the companions and successors that it is allowed to invest it into a single category, which is the position taken by the other 3 Imams, and it gives more flexibility, you see. because when we see that really this one category needs it the most, so much more desperately, but we cannot, we have to distribute it to others as well in equal shares. That would be the Shafi'i strict position. But then when you have that option in the other three mazahibs, it is more flexible. You have this problem, in the country with this one category, and you need to really give them a helping hand. It comes very handy, this hukm. And you give it all for maximum help. وبه قال الأئمة الثلاثة واختاره بعض أصحابنا, and some of our colleagues also chose it, meaning our Shafi'i colleagues. وبه كان يفتي شيخي ووالدي رحمه الله تعالى. This is the Qadi al-Qudat, Umar ibn Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baydawi, his father, says, this is what my father used to say in his fatwas. He was a Qadi al-Qudat, he was a head judge in Azerbaijan, or in whatever area he was in the sense that على أن الآية بيان أن الصدقة لا تخرج منهم لا إيجاب قسمها عليهم. In the sense that the verse is an exposition of the alms being exclusively confined to them, not of the obligatoriness of its division among them. See? So they are all qualified recipients according to that understanding. That's it. Not equal partners, necessarily equal partners. والله تعالى أعلم وأحكم, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم, والحمد لله رب العالمين.